Hi, my name's Amaya, and I'm going to be presenting about Christo and Jeanne Claude, talking about some of their famous works and their key artistic ideas. Who, what, where? Christo and Jeanne Claude are a collaborative artist duo that went to create art for over 5 decades. They first met in Paris in 1958, and from that point on became creative partners as well as life partners, collaborating until Jeanne Claude's death in 2009. They are known for their large-scale environmental installations, constantly redefining the parameters of installation and land art. Their work was often visually impressive as well as controversial. They were all over the world. Their world was their canvas. They have created art in Australia, in Spain, Japan, and many other countries, and in locations like islands, famous monuments, parks, valleys, and many more. Some of their key artistic ideas include ephemeral art, scale, public, landscape, and fabric. Ephemeral art. Each monumental work took years, if not decades, to realize, only to exist for a few weeks. Their works were not designed to be purchasable, permanent, nor replicated, temporarily altering the landscapes they inhabited. Scale. Christo and Jeanne Claude worked on a scale so big that their art transformed entire landscapes and cityscapes into temporary, immersive experiences, often blurring the line between art and the world around it. Public. Christo and Jeanne Claude believed that art should exist outside of museums and be accessible to everyone, which is why they focused on large-scale public installations. Their works were temporary and placed in open shared spaces, allowing people to encounter art in their everyday lives rather than seeking it out. By transforming familiar environments, they invited the public to see their surroundings in a completely new way and made art a collective, shared experience rather than something exclusive. Landscape. Christo and Jeanne Claude saw the landscape not just as a backdrop, but as an essential part of the artwork itself. They worked with natural environments like coastlines, valleys, and even entire islands to highlight their shapes, textures, and scale in ways that we wouldn't be able to predict. Fabric. They use fabric as their primary material by wrapping buildings, landscapes, and structures in vast sheets of cloth, not to hide anything, but to emphasize form, texture, and movement. During their early works, they focused on using materials they could afford, and oil barrels was one of those. They were cheap and easy to stack. They began building their first major outdoor installation at night, stacking oil drums to block the narrow passage found in Paris's Latin Quarter. Rue Visconti, the narrow passage, was blocked for 8 hours, blocking pedestrians and cars from going through. A lot of people say that this could have been perceived as a political statement, comparing to the Berlin Wall, which was built overnight in the East German capital less than a year before. Christo and Jeanne Claude chose this location for the Valley Curtain after exploring 11 other possible locations along the western slopes. The Rifle Gap was simply the most compatible within their vision due to its scale, physical properties, geographic orientation, and general accessibility. The curtain spanned across 2 mountains, 1,250 feet apart in height, varying from 250 to 400 feet. The fabric used was an industrial nylon polyamide dyed orange that was suspended by 3 steel cables that were anchored by the sides of the mountains. For the construction process, the land was leased for 9 months, and the highway which runs through the Rifle Gap was unobstructed due to a 100 feet wide and 20 feet high arched opening in the curtain. The curtain would go up in the middle of June and be dismantled by the middle of September. That was the plan. The Valley Curtain took 28 months to complete. However, on August 11th, 1972, 28 hours after completion of the Valley Curtain, a strong wind estimated in excess of 60 miles per hour made it necessary to start the removal. When Christo's attention was first caught by the Reichstag in 1971, the monument was a symbol of a divided Europe. The Berlin Wall was still present, and the Reichstag had just completed its restorations, and people didn't know what to do with the building due to its turbulent history. Both Christo and Jeanne Claude were involved with using activism with some of their works, having political undertones. And with permission being granted by German political parties, it was quite a challenge to get permission to rep the Reichstag. They spent over 2 decades arguing with German politicians. Opinions for and against the project came from all political parties and were strictly political, nothing to do with the aesthetics of the project. Some of the pros that were argued were that the project would bring attention to the divided city and would also highlight the cultural significance of the building. It could also symbolize openness and liberalism. Some of the cons that were argued were that it could be perceived as a mockery to democracy and German history, and that it was just mindless Western extravagance. After 2 decades of political debate, multiple presidents of the Bundestag, which is the German parliament, and the fall of the Berlin Wall, Christo and Jeanne Claude finally got the approval, as the Reichstag was no longer a symbol of division, but that of unification. The wrapping of the Reichstag was completed on June 24th, 1995, by a workforce of 90 professional climbers and 120 installation workers. The Reichstag was up for 14 days, and all materials were recycled. They used over 1 million square feet of thick woven polypropylene fabric with an aluminum surface, and 9.7 miles of blue polypropylene rope for the wrapping of the Reichstag. The front of the building, the towers, and the roof were covered by 70 tailor-made fabric panels, twice as much as fabric as the surface of the building. Surrounded Islands was the 5th of their temporary installments, which consisted of 11 man-made islands covered in pink fabric. The pink skirts of woven polypropylene fabric would cover the beaches of each island and extend 200 feet offshore, floating on the water, attached to styrofoam booms. Like many of his works, this project was years in the making before the final product, and there were complications along the way. Christo did a small sketch back in 1974, and the project was originally scheduled for completion in 1982, but was delayed due to their own testing procedures and the need for 10 permits from government agencies, 7 public hearings, and the protests of environmentalists who were concerned about nesting ospreys and the base manatees. Jan van der Mark, the director of Miami's Center for the Fine Arts, who also was co-sponsor of the New World Festival that invited the artists here to do the project, said that thanks to Christo and Jeanne Claude, people are going to view these grubby islands as jewels, as they didn't just create arts with these islands, but Christo had a team clean 50 years worth of garbage from the water. This project cost $3.1 million, and as with many of their projects, it was self-funded. They were offered $200,000 of financing from the festival, but they refused. This artwork was displayed in Paris, France for 16 days between September 18th to the 3rd of October 2021. It consisted of the Arc de Triomphe being wrapped in 25,000 square meters of recyclable polypropylene fabric that was colored a silvery blue and with 3,000 meters of red rope. This was entirely funded by Christo's estate, no public funds. The idea to wrap the Arc de Triomphe began all the way back in 1961, 3 years after the pair met in Paris and were living with a view towards the famous monument. It came with complications, from getting permission to engaging in other projects. It was just not possible at the time. In 2017, while working on another project in Paris, Christo decided to revive the idea. And in late 2018, Christo met with the person who manages the Arc de Triomphe and President Macron. In early 2019, the president approved the project. Initially scheduled for display in April 2021, but faced multiple delays due to biodiversity changes. Then COVID happened, and then Christo passed away, with his last wish for his team to finish the project. Jeanne Claude passed away on November 18th, 2009. Christo died on May 31st, 2020, at his home in New York City, where he lived for 56 years. From early wrapped objects to impressive outdoor installations, they continuously were breaking outside the limits of sculpture, architecture, and land art. Like Christo said, being an artist takes courage, and their work proves that. It takes courage to spend years planning something that will only exist for a short time, and even more courage to let it go. But that's exactly what made their art so meaningful. It was about the experience, not the permanence. These are my cited works.